Vasudeva Sutam Devam Kamsachanuramardanam Devaki Paramanandam Krishnam Vande Jagadguru. Good morning. And it's good to be back in sunny San Diego. I can see so many familiar faces and so many new faces too. This wonderful retreat, which was conceived of by Swami Sarvapriyananda ji, which takes us into the heart of the Bhagavad Gita. That's what we are going to do this morning and this afternoon and again tomorrow. So over 2 days we shall explore the inner core of the Bhagavad Gita, what it's all about and what it can do for us. Before I go into it, let me give you an outline of what's in store for us. There are basically 4 talks and Q&A sessions. So the first talk is the big picture. You can see it's titled The Bhagavad Gita's Approach to Spiritual Life. An alternative title would be The Big Picture. It gives you the paradigm of the Bhagavad Gita. The second one, that's the tough one, and that's the most important one. It's called the heart of the Bhagavad Gita, and it's going to be about one key verse in the Bhagavad Gita, which takes us straight to the core teaching of Bhagavad Gita and indeed the entire Vedanta. So that's going to be the next talk, the one after this. That's really the heart of the Bhagavad Gita and the heart of this retreat too. And then tomorrow we have application of what we learned. So the first talk tomorrow will be the power of choice. And then the last talk will be the result of all of this. The talk is called Living in Freedom. What do we get out of all of this? The result, in Sanskrit, phalam. So that's what we have got over the next, this day and tomorrow. So we go into the first talk, which is the big picture, Bhagavad Gita's approach to spiritual life. Now, Houston Smith, a famous professor of religion, who wrote the very well-known book on the religions of the world. It's called The Religions of the World. Earlier it was called Religions of Man, and then it became more politically correct as we evolved, so it became Religions of the World. But in that book, the first chapter is on Hinduism. And he starts off with Hinduism is so diverse and so rich and so varied. How do I approach this? What common theme can I find in Hinduism? So he starts off very beautifully. He says, one way of understanding Hinduism and indeed Vedanta is, you can have what you want. So that's the way he has designed the whole chapter. You can have what you want. Now it sounds very nice, but then it immediately leads to the question, what do we want? And then we go and look at our lives and see what are we pursuing. I mean, if what we are doing is possibly what we want to be doing, what we want to have in life. And if you look at what we want, well, you might make a list of things you want. You might say that I want money, I want good relationships, I want good health, I want that the children should be fine, and the community should be good, there should be world peace, and I should find parking, very, very importantly. And there shouldn't be global warming, huge macro issues and micro issues. There are so many things that we want. But if we try to see overall, what are we pursuing? If you narrow it down, basically what we want is happiness, is satisfaction, is peace, joy, whatever name you call it. Some kind of permanent satisfaction or happiness. Everything else is for happiness. Happiness is for itself. I mean, let me illustrate this. There was this young man who was working had a fine job in a company, and he was asked, what are you doing all this for? And he said, I am working because I love my job. And then somebody said, he was told that, all right, you love your job. In that case, you can keep on doing the job, you will not be paid. And he goes, wait a minute. I will not do the job unless I'm paid. So you are doing the job for the money that you get. Okay, the job is for the money. So the money is for itself? I said, I guess. Good. You'll be given all the money, but you cannot spend it. Then the young man goes, no, wait. I need to spend that money. I need to buy things for myself, for my family, and for others. Then they said, okay, but then you will be allowed to spend that all of that. You'll be allowed to buy things with that money, but you will not be allowed to use any of it. Just the things themselves, they'll be there, but you can't use them. You can't let anybody else use it. You cannot use it. You can buy a car, but you can't drive it. You can buy a house, you cannot live in it. You can buy a school membership, but you can't send your kid to it. So you get all the things that you want, but you cannot use it. So no, that's crazy. I want to use it. Why? Because it will make me and my family happy ultimately. I said, so it's for my family. Okay, let everything be for your family, but from now on they are not your family. It's just some random family. I said, no, it has to be my family. Because that makes me happy. So ultimately everything is for your happiness. And he said, I guess. And what is that happiness for? You see that question is so ridiculous. Everything else is for something else. So the job is for the money is for the things that you can buy, the things are for your family. The happiness of your family, finally, it's for your own satisfaction and peace and happiness. But if somebody asks you, what is your happiness for? That question doesn't seem to make sense. It's like asking, why do you want to be happy? Nobody thinks in that way. I just want to be happy, that's it. So happiness is fundamental. That's one insight, that all our pursuits finally are reduced to our own satisfaction, peace, or happiness. If that sounds selfish, somebody might say, no, I'm not working for my happiness, I'm working for the happiness of the people around me, for the community. I'm working for reducing global warming or for world peace, not for myself. Simple question you need to ask is, will world peace make you happy or unhappy? World peace or reducing global warming, will that make you personally happy or unhappy? You'll say, I guess happy. So ultimately, it leads back again to your personal sense of satisfaction. Yes, an altruistic person, an unselfish person, a person who works for great causes, is seeking his or her own happiness in a wiser way than most of us. But still, it's your own happiness that you're seeking. That's one point. In fact, what we are all seeking to do all our lives is attain happiness, some kind of permanent, deep, profound peace and satisfaction, and to overcome unhappiness. You see, if you look at all the activities of our life, even the smallest one, like switching on a fan or the air condition, we're trying to avoid the discomfort of heat and humidity. Or great things when you're working for world peace or something like that. In everything, basically we are trying to achieve some kind of peace and satisfaction and joy, one, and overcome unhappiness, overcome misery. In Sanskrit it is called Paramananda Prapti, attainment of ultimate bliss, and Atyantika Dukkha Nivritti, complete cessation of sorrow. That's what we are working towards. How successful are we? Not quite. We've been trying all our lives. We're 30, 40, 50, 60 years old. For all our lives we've been trying. And at this moment, we cannot say that we are perfectly satisfied. We have overcome all suffering, overcome all misery. We have not. We have been trying to do something with all our effort in various ways, and we are not much further along the road. Not only us, anybody else around, all around you see. Somebody was saying the indicator of civilization is when the number of suicides exceeds the number of murders. So in an uncivilized world, life is nasty, short and brutal, and people are murdered and killed. And a civilized world is a law and order, and you don't run the risk of, or at least not too bad, of being murdered. But then the other thing is depression and misery and suicide. And they said that recently in the advanced countries of the world, the number of suicides actually exceeds the number of murders and being killed in violent incidents. So really we are not much further along in the quest for overcoming misery in a permanent sense and attainment of bliss. Why is that? Vedanta says that because we are looking in the wrong place. We are looking in the wrong place. The way we are trying to overcome misery, the way we are trying to get happiness and satisfaction, the place we are looking at, the things we are looking at in order to get pleasure, happiness, it does not work. We are looking in the wrong place. We are looking outwards. Whereas, according to Vedanta, the claim is what you are looking for lies within, not outside. You see, if you narrow it down, everything that we are pursuing, it can basically be narrowed down to two things. I've had the experience of living in two interesting places in the last 1.5 years. First, I lived in Hollywood, and next in Manhattan. There's Hollywood and Wall Street. There is pleasure and entertainment on one hand, and greed and power and wealth on the other hand. In one place, it was it's a sign of prestige, if you can say that. I live next door to maybe Brad Pitt or somebody like that. That's prestige in Hollywood. These are the places where the stars live, and that's what people talk about. And if you're in the entertainment industry, somehow connected to the entertainment industry in Hollywood, you're really in the mainstream of Hollywood. And then I switched to Manhattan earlier this year, and there I found the gossip and the talk was that, the person who lives in the house next door, in the apartment next door, is a billionaire. How many billionaires live in this skyscraper, and who runs which hedge fund, and how many millions and billions they have made. That's the mainstream there, in Wall Street in Manhattan. Now these two streams, these are the main avenues in which we have been seeking happiness all our lives, most of mankind, most of humanity through its history. Sri Ramakrishna put it rather directly. He said, lust and gold, kama kanchana. He put it this way, that these are the two avenues in which people to spend their lives trying to achieve happiness and overcome suffering. Desire and wealth, entertainment and making $1 million on Wall Street. These seems to be the main avenues of pursuit of happiness. It does not work. It does not work. Neither here in Hollywood nor there in Wall Street. It has devastating consequences, in fact, for yourself and for the society around you. I mean, I know every day in the morning I go for a walk in Central Park, and yes, I live 1 block down from Yoko Ono. That's the next block is the Dakota where John Lennon used to live, and Yoko Ono lives there. And you can see it's a modern pilgrimage site. Thousands of people every day, they come and they tell the story of how John Lennon was shot, and this is how the story of the Beatles, and there's strawberry fields there, and everybody poses to take a picture, and people are singing Imagine and things like that there. And so that whole thing, the pursuit of happiness through these avenues. But yet, you look at the tragedy surrounding the whole story itself, the misery surrounding it. These two avenues, prime avenues for seeking happiness, and yet they do not work. The key claim of Vedanta, of the Gita, is we are looking in the wrong direction. You see, Arjuna in the Gita was in a similar situation. If you think Wall Street and Hollywood are the embodiment of Maya, imagine he was in a battlefield, which was the extreme of both, Ultimately, with those who know the story of Kurukshetra, it was basically greed and lust and all of this which led to the civil war in the same family. And the terrible thing which was happening in the battlefield of Kurukshetra. And the result was that Arjuna was depressed, was in deep depression. That's how the Bhagavad Gita starts. In fact, the first chapter of the Bhagavad Gita has an interesting name, Arjuna Vishada Yoga. If you translate that translates into the yoga of Arjuna's depression yoga. So you have heard of different kinds of yoga, and depression yoga, it's an important yoga. That's where the spiritual seeking really first starts. When you find everything that we have been trying to do does not lead to any kind of permanent happiness or peace. Vedanta comes in here, Krishna comes in there and tells Arjuna, what you have been looking for, it exists. It is possible to find permanent peace. It is possible to overcome suffering once for all. But it's not out there, not where you've been looking. It exists within yourself. In yourself, in your real nature. Vedanta tells you your real nature is infinite existence, infinite consciousness, infinite bliss. And it's already there. It has always been there, it is there, and it will always be there. You need to discover it. You need to uncover it. And that's the whole pursuit of Vedanta. That's how Krishna starts off. And not only that, all the teachings of Krishna in the Gita are meant for this one thing, finding this secret within. Swami Vivekananda calls it the open secret. This is what we have been searching for all our lives unknowingly. Do it knowingly, it's called Vedanta. Do it unknowingly, it's called life. You're just living life. So this is what is there within us. And this is the whole thing about the Bhagavad Gita, is this discovery of our real nature. Sanskrit word, Atma Jnana. The knowledge of the self. Knowledge of your real nature, of your real self. It's not hidden, it's actually out in the open, but we do not see it. This essential secret is what Krishna conveys to Arjuna in the whole of Bhagavad Gita. If you can sum up the whole of Bhagavad Gita, if you can sum up this retreat which we're going to have today and tomorrow, it's that one word, Atma Jnana. Atma Jnana. Atma, real self. Jnana, knowledge. How to realize what we truly are and to realize the promise of Vedanta and then live that life. That's what Bhagavad Gita is all about. Just a couple of days ago, it was 4th of July, and that was the day on which Swami Vivekananda passed away. Deliberately, consciously, he left the body. And there is a connection with the 4th of July in the United States, because he loved the concept of the ideal of liberty in the United States, the American ideal on which the whole American society is founded. And in fact, he consciously chose this date to give up the body to attain liberty. So 4th of July, we were in Ridgely Manor, where Swami Vivekananda, in upstate New York, where Swami Vivekananda stayed for nearly 6 weeks. He stayed thrice there for a long period of time. And there I was sitting and reading Swami Vivekananda. He writes very touchingly, he says, as the shadows of evening grow longer, fall long on your life. That means in coming close to death. One begins to realize the secret of life. One also begins to realize why others don't realize it. Why not? He writes so powerfully, he says, because they are seeking to find meaning in what is essentially meaningless. They're trying to find meaning in what is essentially meaningless. It is at first a very depressing message. Trying to find meaning in wealth, in pleasure, in success in the world outside, in relationships, even in nature, even in science and whatnot. All the major pursuits of humanity, starting from gross pleasure seeking to the higher pursuits of, it might be conservation of nature, or it might be the pursuit of art or science. Ultimately, in themselves, they are meaningless. They have to be rooted in something that is transcendent, that has inherent meaning. So that's what he says. The whole problem is we're trying to find meaning in that which is meaningless. I also related it to a nice documentary I saw recently. Viktor Frankl. Many of us, we know, Man's Search for Meaning. Here was a person, a trained Freudian psychoanalyst, who went through Auschwitz, who was in the concentration camps and suffered immensely, and then came back. He survived that, and because he said, because I had meaning and purpose in my life, and there were others who did not, and they perished. It's meaning and purpose which sustain human life. So I saw that documentary and I was able to relate. There are some old clips of Viktor Frankl speaking, his original, the talks he gave to students and patients and clients. And there you see that the core idea is meaning. And if you cannot find meaning, life loses all purpose. even the will to live, life sort of disintegrates. One may not commit suicide, but life becomes hollow and meaningless. This search for meaning, if you do it in the wrong place, what Vivekananda says, trying to find meaning in what is essentially meaningless, then we are in trouble. Vedanta says, seek it within yourself. There was this discussion with cancer patients in the documentary. It's so interesting if you see it from a Vedantic perspective. This lady who is a cancer patient, she says, when I am suffering, I am looking for something in me which the cancer has not touched. My body is touched by cancer. My finances are touched by cancer. My social life is ruined by cancer. My relationships are ruined by cancer. My days are filled with pain and suffering. My mind is filled with anxiety. All of them are touched with cancer. I need to find something within me which is not touched by the cancer. You see? That is the Vedantic quest. To find something, the real self within. Atma-jnana, the knowledge of the self within, which is not touched by cancer or anything else. There you can find meaning. And I was listening to Viktor Frankl speaking. Sometimes he's speaking just Vedanta. He says, when everything has been stripped away from you, money, success, power, people, health, the possibility of recovery from a disease, everything is dwindling and disappearing. Is there something that remains rock steady, unchanging, unaffected? And he says that the words, look at the words, that being bliss is the true fount of meaning, is the true source of meaning. He's literally speaking Vedanta there. Being bliss is Sat and Ananda. Being is Sat and bliss is Ananda. Vedanta would say that infinite being, that infinite consciousness, that infinite bliss, which are all one and the same thing, that is the source of meaning. Vivekananda says, there a person can stand secure. And then you live your life. So the essential problem boils down to this. If Vedanta is true, if there is this thing, that we are this infinite existence, consciousness, bliss, then the problem is that we do not know it. That's the essential problem. Vedanta defines the problem as ignorance. Not ignorance of physics or chemistry or anything else or the latest gossip, but ignorance of our true nature. Ignorance of the fact that we are existence, consciousness, bliss. This is the real secret at the heart of the universe. This is the real secret of life. Alan Watts, in his inimitable way in San Francisco, he once said, if religion is the opium of the masses, he's quoting Marx, if religion is the opium of the masses, is religion the opium of life, then the Hindus have the inside dope. It is Bhagavad Gita which gives us the inside dope. And what the inside dope in a sense is, I'm going to tell you in the next talk. That's the heart. It sort of makes me out to be an unsavory, it's kind of a drug dealer kind of thing, the inside dope. But here let's consider what the essential problem is then. The problem is, if this is true, then the problem is we do not realize it. We do not know it. It's not real for us. We hear about it, we read about it, but it's not real for us. So the essential problem is defined as ignorance. Let me write it here, and now this high-tech stuff will pay for itself. When I move out from the microphone, yes. Now we get into the subject, the Bhagavad Gita's approach to spiritual life. Let's see, what is the approach? The problem and the solution and the method or technique. The problem is, essential problem is ignorance. And remember, ignorance of what? Of that great secret that we are Brahman. We don't know that. We are ignorant of that. And the solution can only be for any ignorance. The solution always is knowledge. Yes, is knowledge. In Sanskrit, ajnana. Ajnana means not jnana, ignorance. And the solution is jnana, knowledge. And the method is what might be called knowledge yoga. Yoga is just the method, the path. So the path of knowledge. I'm writing the Sanskrit here, jnana yoga. To put it simply, you have to know it. You have to know it. Now the problem is, how do you know it? And Vedanta tells you, first you hear these truths, then you think deeply about them. What questions do you have? Solve all your doubts, get conviction, then meditate upon your conviction, and it will dawn upon you. The scales will be lifted, the veil will part, and you will get this realization that I am actually not this body and mind. I'm not this little person. I'm an infinite existence, consciousness, bliss. That's what I am. And this will actually be a reality. Now the problem becomes, Swami, that's nice, but I have been attending these retreats for longer than I care to think about. And it still has not dawned upon me. It's been decades now. Then what is the problem? The Vedanta says that the problem is that the mind is scattered. The Sanskrit word is vikshepa. Let's say the scatteredness of the mind, or the lack of focus, let's say. Lack of concentration or focus. By the way, it's not just a problem for Vedanta students, it's a widespread problem. Daniel Goleman, the person who talked about EQ for the first time, emotional intelligence, his latest concern is this lack of ability to concentrate, lack of focus. And he's written a book called Focus about it, especially the younger generation, he says. They are so busy with their electronic devices that they're unable to focus. Attention spans have dwindled alarmingly. Once Vedanta was being discussed in the Gospel of Ramakrishna, you see that Vedanta is being discussed and Sri Ramakrishna is sitting right there. He does not participate in the discussion. Other people are talking about Vedanta. He just listens, and then finally he makes just one comment. He said, "This is good what you're talking about, but it should be assimilated." In Bengali he said, "Kothagulo bhalo, dharana howa chai." That means these words are good, the talk is good, but it should be assimilated. It should become real for you. So lack of focus. And the solution is focus. Easier said than done. What is prescribed here is dhyana yoga, raja yoga, meditation. The Gita, Krishna tells you, you have to focus. The whole science of meditation is taught here. And then you go, well, Swami, actually, I have been meditating or trying to for 30 years now. I'm not much further along the road. Then what is the problem? And it's not just our problem. When Krishna teaches Arjuna the science of meditation in the 6th chapter of the Gita, Arjuna is the same thing. He says, what you're teaching is essentially useless. Why? I might as well try to control the wind. The mind is difficult to control, O Krishna. It's fickle like the wind. It blows where it will. So it's an ancient problem. How to control the mind. And for that, Raja Yoga. But why is it so difficult to control the mind? The next problem is, don't worry, this is the last one, is impurity of the mind. In Sanskrit, chitta mala, impurity of mind. Mind, chitta, impurity, mala. Impurity of the mind. And the solution, you don't have to wait for it, you can tell me, is purity. Yes. Chitta Shuddhi, it's a term we come across again and again in spiritual life. Chitta Shuddhi, purification of the mind. And it's there in every religious tradition across the world. Purity of mind. How do you attain that? And the method prescribed in the Gita is karma yoga, spiritualizing all your actions. Can you see it goes from the gross to the subtle to the very subtle. It goes from karma yoga, what actions accomplished with body and mind, to what is essentially mental, meditation, to what is essentially an insight into your reality. You can see how it's graded. Now what will happen is, if you look at the Bhagavad Gita, the entire approach to spiritual life is Jnana Yoga, Raja Yoga, Karma Yoga, and Bhakti Yoga. Krishna teaches this as an especially powerful method, the approach of devotion, love of God, which accomplishes both actually, purity of mind and focus of mind. Now by all of this, you can attain enlightenment and realize that you are this Brahman. I am Brahman. This is what is hidden from us right now. This is hidden from us by ignorance. Ignorance can be removed by knowledge. Lack of focus can be removed by meditation. And impurity of mind can be removed by karma yoga. And in fact, bhakti yoga is a powerful way of reinforcing the purity of mind and focus too. Bhakti yoga is the path of love, devotion to God. And one can see how that can work. Just an aside about bhakti yoga. Basically, bhakti is love of God. If you're lucky enough to have faith in God, then bhakti yoga works wonders. What it does basically, you see, desire works more at the level of the heart than the intellect. And we have a saying, the heart wants what it wants. It's not your intellect wants what it wants. It's the heart which wants what it wants. Ignorance works at the level of intellect. You get knowledge in the intellect and remove ignorance. But the thing is, if the heart is not purified, if the desires are not sublimated, then what happens is that blocks enlightenment. The mind and the tendencies, they continuously flow outward to the objects of desire. And bhakti works at the level of the heart. What's the nature of desire and what's the nature of bhakti? The nature of desire is, I want the world. And the nature of bhakti is, I want God. Just replace world with God. Again, easier said than done, but that's the nature of bhakti. And you can see how that automatically purifies the mind and focuses the mind too. So, bhakti yoga, karma yoga, raja yoga, jnana yoga, in sum, this is the teaching of the Bhagavad Gita. By all of this, attain enlightenment, that you are not this body and mind, you are an infinite existence, consciousness, bliss. And then live your life. Life still continues. It does not disappear in a flash of light and that's the end. No. In spiritual life, you need to go away and you need to come back. You need to go away and you need to come back. This Buddhist teacher, I love the way he puts it. I think it was Jack Cornfield probably. He writes that after the ecstasy, the laundry. So after the retreat, the laundry is still there, back at home. Unfortunately, it's still there. So Arjuna, after all the Vedanta, he still had to fight the battle of life. After all our enlightenment and philosophy and meditation and whatnot, you still have your life to go back to. So all of this will give you the enlightenment in the light of which you can lead your life. That will be the subject of the last talk, living in freedom. So this encompasses the whole of the teaching. You can see a structure has been set up here. The problem has been defined as ignorance and the solution as knowledge. But because it doesn't seem to work, you investigate further and see what else is there, what else is holding us up, holding us back. So one is lack of focus, in Sanskrit vikshepa, and the training in meditation helps us to focus. The meditation itself does not work too well because the mind is full of garbage which we have put in this life, maybe in past lives. That needs to be cleaned up to a certain extent. And so the impurity of mind has to be cleaned up. Chitta Shuddhi has to be attained. Karma yoga is taught as a powerful method. When in the Gita, again and again, action, the importance of action is emphasized. That action helps you to prepare your mind for higher spiritual pursuit. In fact, when Arjuna is taught Vedanta, his first reaction is, this is good, this is just what I want. I want to be enlightened and realize I'm Brahman, so I don't want to fight this battle. And Krishna says, no, you have to do this. You still have to lead your life wherever you are, what you are doing. But now, what you are doing it for worldly purposes, now you do it for as a spiritual practice. You may be teaching for the purposes of earning your living or working. It may be even working in your hedge fund in Wall Street or being an actor in Hollywood. that was being done for spiritual, for worldly purposes earlier, the same thing, the same battle of life can be converted into a spiritual struggle by the science of karma yoga. That's very important because I again and again come across this question. Swami, it's okay for you. You're a monk. The whole of your life is a spiritual practice. But we have, as it were, two lives. There's something that we are doing here, coming here for a Vedanta retreat. And also I have my life of mortgages and kids and health problems and relationship problems and a whole, whole life out there. And the whole problem is that life out there is so real, it swamps my spiritual life. There's very little time left over for spiritual life. There's very little time, very little energy left over for Vedanta or meditation, or any of these yogas or whatever. That's where karma yoga comes in. Thousands of years ago when Krishna said, Arjuna, you don't have to go away to the mountain tops to become a yogi. You can become a yogi right here in the middle of the battleground of life. In fact, this is where you must do it. Vivekananda puts it so powerfully. He says, the one who runs away from life to meditate and die in a Himalayan cave, he has missed the way. The one who plunges headlong into the vanities of life, he too has missed the way. Now this is paradoxical. If you run away from life, you've missed the way. If you embrace life as it is, you've missed the way. Then what is the way? There's only two ways. Either you are in life or you run away from life as it seems to be. He says the way is to defy life itself. To find God where you are, with whom you are, in whatever situation you are. Never approach anything except as God, as this ultimate reality. And we'll see how to do that. So that's when life becomes yoga, karma yoga, your work, your daily activities, whether at home, whether personal, or in the office or the workplace, or your activities for the community, they all become spiritual practice. It's a powerful science. That's one of the major themes of Bhagavad Gita. How do you deal with your life and convert it? 24-hour spiritual life, not a weekend spiritual retreat, but all week. And people sometimes ask me, what's the strangest place you've given talks? And one of them is, I gave a talk, like you have the TSA security check in the airports. Yeah. Once I gave a talk in a security check in India. I was the only passenger passing through at midnight in Lucknow airport. And the security people, the Central Industrial Security Force, we call them in India, they sort of put you in a box on top of that and they frisk you. Now, the policeman there, he saw me dressed like this and he said, Swami, give us a talk. I said, yeah. He said, yes. And he called the other security people around. And they gathered around. I was thinking, what do I tell them? And then I told this person, the officer, that when you leave home, would you worship God in any form and when you leave home? And this is in Uttar Pradesh in central India. So he says in Hindi, "Ha, Hanuman ji ko phul chadate hain. When I leave home, I put a flower at the feet of Lord Hanuman." I said, good. Now what you do is, when you are doing your duty throughout the day, you're working, every time a person comes in front of you and you check this person, do it politely, do it to the best of your ability, do it firmly, and then mentally, when you're done, offer one more flower at the feet of Hanuman, mentally. And then the next person, and so on for hundreds of persons who go through in front of you. And he was so happy, he liked it. He burst out in, a simple man, he burst out in Hindi, he said, "Arey wah, din bhar Hanuman ji ka puja." Wow, I'll do the worship of Hanuman throughout the day. That's karma yoga, where now I'm doing the same thing, but I've converted it into spiritual practice. I've seen a monk about to enter a classroom. Before he enters the classroom to teach kids, 10-year-olds, he bows down. They can't see him, otherwise they'll have a field day with him. He bows down quietly and then he enters. I asked him afterwards, what were you bowing down to? And he said, I see them all as the child Ramakrishna. I worship and love Ramakrishna. I see all of them as child Ramakrishna. In India, you have this, in Christianity too, the Christ baby. The Krishna as the baby, Gopala, Ramlala, Rama as the baby. Now, why would you want to worship God as a baby? Because that's another form, the strong feeling of love that you have for a baby. Now, that's what you focus towards God. Vivekananda said the one way of doing karma yoga is that the essence of one teaching of Vedanta secret is this, that you divinize your relationship with the human and humanize your relationship with God. Divinize your relationship with the human and humanize your relationship with God. What is your relationship with human beings? Earlier it was father, mother, brother, husband, wife, friend, enemy, I'm indifferent. Now it becomes all of them are my beloved Lord. All of them. No matter what form they come in. They are the Lord himself in all of these forms. Divinize your relationship with the human. That's one way. The counterpart is humanize your relationship with the divine. So how do I relate to God? God is the father, God is the mother, God is my friend like Arjuna and Krishna. God is my child, like the Christ baby or the Krishna baby or the Rama baby. God is my child. Or even as lover, Radha and Krishna. So all of these forms, they are human relationships. But now you're using them to spiritualize your relationship, humanize your relationship with the divine. And then that way you serve God. So that's one way of karma yoga. Say, I don't believe in God. All right, then you serve the same consciousness which you find within yourself in all of these beings. Knowing all of these beings, it's not that you only are Brahman. If you are Brahman, everybody else is Brahman too. You see, Vedanta, we'll see later on in the second talk. Vedanta teaches us that everybody is Brahman. In fact, one Swami, who was a well-known teacher a few decades back, his brother had mental issues, he had delusions, and he was locked up in one of those mental asylums which they had earlier, horrible places. So he went to visit his brother, and his brother said, "Hey, brother, this is unfair. You say that I am Brahman, and people, they revere you, they worship you, and I say I am God, I am Brahman, and they lock me up. This is not fair. It's not fair. It's not equal treatment." And the Swami, his brother, said, "Look, the difference is this. When I say I am Brahman, I say you too are Brahman, everybody is Brahman, and that's what we should realize. But what you are saying is, I am God, now you worship me." So they lock you up, obviously. So that way one can do karma yoga too. One finds the same divinity everywhere. If you don't want to use the God talk, many people say, don't use the word God. So, all right, you use the word consciousness. That's what God is, pure consciousness in Vedanta. You find that in everybody and you relate to them in that way. So that is the science of karma yoga. There's a whole science of meditation, 6th chapter of the Gita, but we will not be talking about it today. The science of love of God, bhakti yoga, all of that is there in the Bhagavad Gita. These are major themes, but our retreat today and tomorrow is focused on one thing only. The insight that you are Brahman, that I am Brahman. And that is this level, the final level. That's what we will focus on. And we'll see where we get. The Bhagavad Gita, now let me take a step back. Vedanta basically is the philosophy, the spiritual teachings of the Upanishads. You know, the holy books of the Hindus are called the Vedas, and in the Vedas you find the Upanishads. The Upanishads are the final teachings, the highest teachings of the Vedas. So Vedanta, Anta means the end or the final teaching, the final conclusion of the Vedas. That's what you find in the Upanishads. And there are many of these Upanishads, primarily 10. Why 10? Because Shankaracharya, a great philosopher, saint of about 1400 years ago in India, he selected 10 of them to write elaborate commentaries on. And we use those commentaries to find meaning in them. So those Upanishads, those philosophical sacred texts, they form the foundation of Vedanta. And they're very abstruse, difficult. What Krishna did in the Bhagavad Gita was to take the message of the Upanishads, the same message, I am Brahman, your reality is Brahman, and then put them in a more practical way, a more concentrated way in this text called the Bhagavad Gita. This most delightful dialogue between the human and the divine, which you find in the Mahabharata, Bhagavad Gita, in 700 verses. In fact, sometimes Krishna has taken the exact verse, the mantra from the Upanishad, and quoted it. So he's the original plagiarist, I think. And he just uses the verses from the Upanishads number of times in the Bhagavad Gita. So the Bhagavad Gita is in a sense the practical teaching, the summary of the Upanishads. One of a very nice verse puts it this way: if all the Upanishads were cows and Krishna is the cowherd boy, then the Bhagavad Gita is the milk of the cows, which he gets from the Upanishads and gives it forth. And Arjuna is supposed to be the calf. So the Bhagavad Gita is the essence of the teachings of the Upanishads. Upanishads are remarkable texts. In fact, Thoreau, when he was in Walden Pond, he writes, he began his day by reading a few pages of the Bhagavad Gita. It's there in the original Walden, it's there. And in his cabin, he had a selection of books on Indian spirituality, Gita, Upanishads, which he had borrowed from Emerson. Emerson is called an author said Emerson is the mind of America. And very few people know how much of the mind of America was influenced by the Gita, by the Bhagavad Gita. I think it was Thoreau who writes that when I read these pages, I'm brought into contact with the light of an earlier dawn, the spiritual dawn of humanity. Schopenhauer, great German philosopher, when he came into contact with the Upanishads, he says, I consider there is no other study in the world as beneficial as the study of these Upanishads. Actually, what he read was a Latin translation of a Persian translation of the Sanskrit original. So he writes, actually, I consider no other study in the world as beneficial as the study of these Upanishads, except perhaps the original. He says that. And every day, as long as he lived after that, before going to bed, he would read a few pages of the Upanishads. He said, the Upanishads have been the solace of my life, they are the solace of my death. They will be the solace of my death. His masterpiece, The World as Will and Idea. I didn't read the whole of it, I skimmed through it. But in the very first chapter, English translation of the German original, in the very first chapter, he said what's going to follow in 4 volumes. He says, what's going to follow in these pages was best known to the ancient Indians. They called it Maya. So Vedanta, again, the inside dope. Now, on these Upanishads, and there's another text called the Brahma Sutra. I will not venture into that. That's really deep territory. It is aphorisms based on the Upanishads. If you have questions, those questions are philosophically argued out there. So these 3 sources, the Upanishads, the Bhagavad Gita, and the Brahma Sutra, they form the triple canon, the basis of Vedanta. The final text which you have to really master if you want to study Vedanta are these books. Luckily nowadays we have wonderful translations into many languages, especially English. Now, there's a reason why I'm giving you this background. More than 1,000 years ago, there started this tradition of writing commentaries in Sanskrit on these original texts. So commentaries on the Upanishads, commentaries on the Gita, commentaries on the Brahma Sutra. And the first and still the most respected commentary was written by Adi Shankaracharya about 1400 years ago. These commentaries established different systems of philosophical thought. Non-dualist system established by Shankaracharya's commentaries. The qualified monastic system, Vishishtadvaita, established by Ramanujacharya's commentaries about 1,000 years ago. The dualistic thought, the system of thought established by the commentaries of Madhvacharya, and more. There is Shuddhadvaita of Vallabhacharya, there is Dvaitadvaita of Nimbarkacharya, there is the Achintya Bhedaved of the Gaudiya Vaishnavism school. If you think these are very esoteric terms, mean nothing to you, they do. If you have seen the ISKCON people singing and dancing in the streets and Hare Krishna, if you've seen them, I think most of you have, they belong to one of these schools, the Gaudiya Vaishnava school. So they all, in fact, what you see as the visible face of Hinduism, at its root, if you mine deep into the ideas behind them, you'll end up with one of these schools. And these schools are all based on these commentaries, and these commentaries are all based on the Bhagavad Gita and the Upanishads and the Brahma Sutra. So that gives you the big picture of Vedanta. One more thing, then I'm done, I'll go into Q&A. You see, among all of these commentaries, I am relying on a particular commentary. Those who have read Indian philosophy know this. We are, in the Vedanta Society here, we are primarily non-dualists, but not in a strict, exclusive sense. We are non-dualists in an inclusive sense. So we say that there is truth in all the systems. There are wonderful insights in all the systems. But primarily, our backbone, our foundation is the non-dual Vedanta based on the Upanishads, especially based on the commentaries of Shankaracharya. Why I'm saying this is because in the next session, as we go into the heart of Bhagavad Gita, I'm basing it entirely on the commentary of Shankaracharya. And I'll be reading a text with you right here and trying to gain that essential insight, but based on the commentary of Shankaracharya. Even this structure, there's a saying, buyer beware. You say,
Yes.
what's the word?
Caveat emptor.
Caveat emptor. So, just in interests of full disclosure, this structure is based on the non-dualistic approach. You might have already understood. You can see how it privileges knowledge above everything else, right? So the problem is ignorance, and so the solution is knowledge. And obviously the answer will be Jnana Yoga, which Advaita Vedanta excels in, non-dual Vedanta. And all the others are retained. There is a brand of Vedanta doing the circles now, especially popular in the West, which says you don't have to meditate, you don't have to have devotion to God. It doesn't even talk about moral life, doesn't even talk about ethics, nothing. I'll just give you, you just realize you're Brahman, that's it, finished. What do you have to do? There's nothing to do. Now they are not wrong. You will realize in what sense they are right. But it's also deeply misleading to say that nothing else is required. That's not true. There are other problems which require solutions. There are problems at these levels. And at each level there is a different solution. So you see, in the traditional teaching of non-dualism of Shankaracharya, meditation is not abandoned. Devotion to God is not abandoned. Your puja and your rituals and karma yoga, action in the world is not abandoned. All of them are extremely useful for generating the final insight which comes from the path of Advaita, of Jnana Yoga basically. But all of them are useful. So all of them have to be retained. That's the approach. If you were to approach a different kind of teacher, a qualified monist teacher or a dualist teacher, then the structure would change. Same text, Bhagavad Gita, but the structure would change. Say a dualist teacher like Madhvacharya would immediately privilege Bhakti Yoga to the top. Would say you start off with karma yoga, and then in between Jnana Yoga, the path of knowledge and the path of meditation are useful. Ultimately, devotion is what will get you to enlightenment. You see, it's because the way they have framed the problem. The way the problem has been framed by in the path of knowledge is, the problem is ignorance of your real nature, and so the solution is knowledge. But if you go to a yogi, a Patanjali yogi, path of meditation, they say, no, ignorance is not the problem. The real problem is our minds are scattered. Concentrate the mind. I will show you a systematic technique of meditation. Focus the mind, settle the mind. A deeply calm, deeply focused mind will reveal the truth to you. Scatteredness of the mind, lack of focus is the problem, and the solution is always meditation. You see, the problem has now been shifted. Different problem, not ignorance. And this has big impact on our spiritual practice. I ran into this yogi in the Himalayas who was in a cave nearby. Young man. So he was very interested in Patanjali Yoga. Patanjali Yoga tells you the method is samadhi. The method is not a Vedanta retreat. So much talk will not help. You sit and meditate and you will realize God. You'll get enlightenment. So he was looking for samadhi, the deepest state of deepest meditative state. I asked him, what about the path of knowledge? Don't you like that? And he said to me, yeah, that's okay, but they talk too much. They don't have any realization. It's in meditation that you get realization. So you see how he has framed the problem. The problem is mind is not calm and focused. If the mind is calm and focused, you will get enlightenment. If you go to the teacher of bhakti, they will say, no, scatteredness of the mind is not a problem. Ignorance is not a problem. The real problem is lack of devotion and faith to God and surrender to God. You have devotion to God, faith in God and surrender to God, everything else will be taken care of. You see how the problem is again reoriented. Now Vivekananda's genius here was, he pointed out, if we take an honest look at ourselves, all of them are our problems. We are ignorant of our real nature, our minds are scattered, and really we do not have strong devotion, surrender, faith in God. So all of those solutions will be very useful to us. He recommended a harmony of the 4 yogas. The harmony of jnana, bhakti, meditation, yoga, and karma. So harmony of 4 yogas was strongly recommended by Vivekananda. And in one sense, all of the teachers, Krishna included, Shankaracharya, Ramanuja, all of the masters actually recommend, in some sense, a combination of the 4 yogas. They may have hierarchies. This is final, this is supporting, this is central, others are peripheral, but they all emphasize that they are all needed. All the practices are needed. Because they realize we all have these problems. But again, to narrow it down again, our focus, starting from now, in the next session, will be the final enlightenment. That I am Brahman right here, right now. Why can I not know it? What does it mean to be Brahman? What is Brahman? What does it mean? And how can I get that intuition? We'll go directly into it. There's one verse, because this is the essential teaching of the Bhagavad Gita. So there are many verses about the self-knowledge, Atma Jnana. There are many verses, wonderful verses. But among the most profound, I would say the most profound in the whole of the Bhagavad Gita, I've heard one teacher describe it in Hindi as "Ye to Gita ki hriday hai." Literally it means this verse is the heart of the Bhagavad Gita. That's where I got the title of the talk, the heart of the Bhagavad Gita. So we will take up just one verse. It will reveal to us what Vedanta means by Brahman. What is this ultimate reality it talks about? And it will reveal, at least attempt to show us, because this thing is already present. I should be able to know it, understand it, ascertain it, get an intuition about it right now. It will attempt to show that to us. That's what we'll try to do in the next talk, the inside dope. But before that, we have got some time going into it, and let's have a few quick questions.
So we do have a microphone, so we ask you to wait till the microphone gets to you, because it allows everybody to hear the question.
So there's a question there. Here. All right. We'll come next to this gentleman.
Could you please, Swami, repeat the story about the airport, what your advice was about Hanuman? I didn't quite catch it.
All right. Again, see the context. The context was spiritual life seems to take a back seat to our so-called real life in the world. You have a life in the world out there. And many people come with this complaint that I don't have time and energy left over for study, prayer, meditation. All of these seem to be making heavy demands on my time. And don't have time. I have to earn a living. You're a monk, so it's easy for you. But for me, I have to have these so many competing demands on my time and energy. How do I practice spirituality? It seems to be a real demand for time and energy, and it takes time and energy. So the answer here is Karma Yoga. Karma Yoga is a remarkable teaching which enables you to convert your so-called secular life into spiritual life. Our so-called seems to be worldly actions into a spiritual practice. So the example I gave was an experience I had in an airport. It was in Lucknow in India, where the security person said, give me a talk. And I asked the person, before leaving home, do you worship God? And he says, yes, I put flowers at the feet of Lord Hanuman. Now look, in his mind there is this bifurcation. I am a security man at the airport. That's my job. And I worship the Lord in this particular form just for a few minutes before I leave home in the morning. So these are two different things. One is religious, sacred. The other one is worldly, secular. What karma yoga does is, you cannot stop. You cannot give up your job. You're going to starve. You cannot sit at home putting flowers at the feet of Lord Hanuman all day long. So what you can do is, take that work which you are doing. Each time a person comes in front of you, you check that person, do your job to the best of your ability, and mentally consider this action a flower which you are offering at the feet of your beloved Lord. It is worship of God. As we go on to understand Vedanta, we will see it's not imagination. It's literally true. If Brahman is the one reality of this world, then anybody who comes in front of me is Brahman. As Vivekananda said, never approach anything except as God. It's a statement of fact. It may start off as imagination because we don't know it. We think what we know as the world is a false superimposition, which we shall see later on. So when you say that you're worshipping God in this person in front of you, it's actually a statement of the truth, though we know it not right now. Karma yoga enables you to convert daily action, cooking, driving, your office work, your work as a nurse, as a teacher, anything that you do. It converts it into spiritual practice. You can still go on with your life and you can still be doing spiritual practice at the same time. That's the power of karma yoga. There's a question here.
Please hold the microphone close. So, even if we do all of these,
yes,
but then there's something called divine grace. One doesn't have realization until you have divine grace. Even Holy Bhagavad told the sadhu that no matter how much you want to meditate, but unless Thakur's grace is there.
True.
So, why does Advaita Vedanta keep silent about divine grace? I don't see any specific mention.
Right.
Where does it all fit in?
The question of divine grace. Now, you see, even that question comes up if you are a believer in God. Right? There is God, without God's grace nothing happens. So that's, Advaita would say, first of all, that's dualistic talk. Now, in Advaita, you are Brahman. If there's any grace, that's your own grace. Not only that, when you say, if you do all of this, actually if you do any of this, it's already a sign of divine grace. That the fact that we are in Vedanta, that the fact that we are exposed to the core teachings of spirituality is actually, in the Himalayas, the monks say, if you have good karma, you'll have a nice life. Happy, healthy, prosperous, things will go well for you. If you have really, really good karma, you come to Vedanta. They say that, yes, they say that. So it's already a sign of grace. In, I think, the Bhagavad Gita, a text of radical Advaita Vedanta, it starts off, the very first verse is, Ishvara anugraha deva pumsam advaita vasana. It's by the special grace of God that an individual gets a liking for non-dualism. Advaita vasana. The desire for transcending duality. That itself is the grace of God. Now to answer your question directly, where does Advaita talk about grace? In the Upanishads, there is a saying that, there is a verse which says, that whoever the Atman chooses, to him it reveals itself. Yamevesha vrinute tasyesha vivrunute tanum swam. Whomever it chooses, to him it reveals itself. Him, it means the real self reveals itself. Now the dualistic commentators see that is the grace of God. Whomever God chooses, to that person God reveals himself, herself, itself, whatever you call it. The non-dualist doesn't have the luxury of calling it God. So it says whomever it chooses. Now that makes it arbitrary. So whatever I do, all of this, in terms of a question, has no meaning until it chooses me. But then whom does it choose? The question arises. And the commentator Shankaracharya says there, the Atman chooses the one, wait for it, the Atman chooses the one who chooses it. If you want enlightenment, you'll get enlightenment. Again, in non-dualistic language, Ramana Maharshi, somebody approached him and said, am I really qualified for all of this? Will I really get enlightenment for? And Ramana Maharshi, he said, did you say, just a minute, did you say I? I. Yes. Then you're qualified. Anybody who can say I is qualified. And who cannot say I? Because you remember his essential teaching was, who am I? If you can say I, then you're qualified. You have the material to look into, to investigate. Yeah. Question, okay, there's one question there, I'll come back to you.
Regarding divinity, I have heard, I have read that we are divine, regarding divinity. That we are divine. And then I have read that we as humans are not divine.
Yes.
Can you please clarify?
Yes. As we know ourselves, bag of flesh and blood, a mind, a body-mind complex, nothing particularly divine about it. It's material. If you say this is divine, a scientist would say, or a philosopher will say, you're just playing with words. What is a material mass of blood and flesh and blood and bones, tissue and organs? If you want to call this divine, it's nothing particularly divine about it, well, you're welcome, but it doesn't make sense. So as we know ourselves, that's not divine, there's nothing particularly divine about it. But as Vedanta promises that we are, and we shall see in the next talk what we really are, that is divinity. So, to answer your question directly, what we know of ourselves in ignorance is material, it's not divine. When we get knowledge of who we really are, this Brahman, then we have a right to say that I am divine. Yeah. There's a question here. I'll come to you.
Swami, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah.
Can others hear the question? Yes.
Why do you feel it has been made so difficult for us to get past everything that moves us out there? Our senses move us out there. The world is very seductive with all this stuff
Yes.
we talk about. For me, I'm glad you mentioned Emerson. When I was in college, I came across the transcendentalists
Yes.
who had discovered the Indian texts and started to talk about something I never heard of before.
Right.
It seems we have a lot of competition.
Yes.
A
Yes.
lot of competition
Yes.
for spirituality
Right.
in our makeup and in the world.
Right. Okay. It's a good question. First, a little bit about Emerson. I just remember this interesting story about, there's this book, American Veda, Philip Goldberg. He writes about how Eastern spirituality came to the West. First through the Transcendentalists, and then especially through Vivekananda. He mentions in the whole chapter on how Vivekananda came and the Vedanta Society started. First one is where I am in New York. So he tells that story. In the course of telling that, he says in India, on the banks of the Ganga, in the foothills of the Himalayas, he came across this very traditional Indian Swami who was sitting in a little cottage. And he went and asked that Swami, do you speak English? And he spoke perfect English. And then he asked him, how did you become a monk? And the Swami replied, well, I was not interested in religion. I was an atheist. I got a chance to read literature. I went to an Ivy League college. Maybe I think he mentioned Harvard. I went to an Ivy League college. I got a chance to go there in the United States. I went there, read Emerson, decided to become a monk. A Hindu monk, you see, the pizza effect. Very interesting. And Emerson got his ideas from the Gita, from the Upanishads. All right. Now to answer your question. The answer to the question is, it has not been made difficult for us. We have made it difficult for ourselves. All of these problems are our problems, complications that we have designed over a lifetime, many lifetimes. Let me tell you a little story that Alan Watts used to say. He said that the best way of answering these questions is a little story which children seem to get immediately, adults not so quickly. But the whole mystery of life and why is it like this? So he puts it this way. God, the only reality that ever was, is, or will be, got lonely. Natural. All by himself, his lonesome self. So he decided to play. But where would he find playmates? There's nobody else. Poor God. He hit upon a nice plan. What's the plan? He pretended to be not himself. God pretended to be not himself. He pretended to be you and I and him and her. And God got so good at this game, God forgot that God was God. And God thought it was I and you and him and her. And the game went along merrily, sometimes miserable, sometimes happy, and going through bodies and minds and many experiences and lifetimes until God got tired of the play and decided to get out of the game and find himself all over again. That's when he came to a Vedanta retreat. Now the problem is God with his infinite powers has made the situation so complicated for himself. That's why he needs all of this. But, the interesting thing is, it need not be so complicated. We'll go into the next stage, the next talk, and you will see, I do hope you will follow it very carefully. At the very least, just about every question will be answered. I don't know if you'll get enlightened. That intuition is, the grace of God is your own grace upon yourself. But at least if you follow it carefully, I cannot see any question in spiritual life that remains unanswered after that. In one sense, the game is over after that talk. That's how I'm pitching it. But, so that's my answer to you. We have done it. There's a whole philosophy called Kashmir Shaivism. In Vedanta, we speak about ignorance, Maya, which blocks us, and the competition we have from the senses, sense objects, the senses flowing outwards. We cannot concentrate. We cannot believe in God. We do not seem to get the intuition. All of these problems are there because of Maya. In Kashmiri Shaivism, they say not even Maya can stop you. You are Shiva, the ultimate reality. What can stop Shiva? Shiva will do exactly as Shiva pleases. Right now, Shiva wants to play in this world. So Shiva is playing. She said, no, Swami, I want to get out of this world. I want to be enlightened. Well, they will say that right now Shiva wants to be enlightened. So Shiva is playing at wanting to be enlightened. The moment Shiva decides to be enlightened, will be enlightened. Nothing can stop you. We will actually see how simple, how fundamental it is in the next talk. Talk. Here's a question.
Thank you so much, Swamiji.
There was a question at the back. I'll come to you after this one.
We're already missing you. Swamiji, please pray for us so that along with your words, showers a blessing of understanding go deep into our hearts.
Yes.
We need your prayer as well as your talking. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. There's a question there.
One last question.
One last question. We'll take two. Let's see if we can make two quick questions.
If
Yes.
I enjoy the entertainment of Hollywood and the wealth of Wall Street,
Yes.
am I not glimpsing the divine? So the carrot and stick yoga also moves us down the path.
It does, and not only that. What Vedanta shows you after we will see. Ultimately, even the entertainment of Hollywood and the wealth of Wall Street, are they not Brahman? They must be. If God is all of this, is playing hide and seek with himself, then Hollywood also is God. Wall Street also is God. The battlefield of Kurukshetra where Arjuna was is also God. Everything that we experience is God. That insight alone is what is necessary. You don't have to give up Hollywood or Wall Street. In fact, that's how God is manifesting itself right now. Brahman is manifesting itself for us. If you realize the background of it, then play the game, it will not hurt you. You will play in peace and joy and light. Nothing will touch you there. And the whole of life will become one big, I don't want to say party, but a mart of joy. Sri Ramakrishna used to say a mart of joy. Okay. The question here,
yes.
Last one.
Okay, thank you. So Swami Vivekananda said, never see anybody or anything other than
Except as God.
Except as God. So I'm going to set it up, and I want to first apologize to my fellow seekers. Please don't see this as an exercise into depression, but please see this as a possible way for us to learn. So me and my friends, Christine, we were driving down this morning, and just a conversation came up about where she goes for walks with her dog in some park in Rancho Bernardo. And then after that, she couldn't help but think, and she said, but the only thing about this park is it reminds me of that incident that happened. And those of us in Rancho Bernardo, in San Diego, probably might remember, there was a heinous crime committed by a person near that, the Escondido Park, Lake Hodges area. And it was heinous beyond belief. And so at that point, I couldn't help but think, well, let's see, how does Vedanta, how are we to look at this person who committed that crime and see God, or see that consciousness, the same consciousness that pervades you and I and all of us here? What is to be our attitude towards that as a person, on a personal level, and as well as on a societal level? Do we lock him up? Do we electric chair?
All right.
What do we? Yeah.
So this is basically what is called the problem of evil. If such deep suffering exists in the world, does it not argue against the existence of God, spirituality, or anything like that? Deep inhumanity. One incident in itself so bad, and there are many such incidents, and throughout the history of humanity there have been, and they are right now going on, and there will be in future. So how do you reconcile this? This problem becomes a problem especially with dualistic religions. When you say an all-powerful, loving and just God, how do you reconcile this with a horrible world? In non-dualistic religion also, in Vedanta, how do you reconcile this with one existence, consciousness, bliss, and why horrible things should be there? Now, there are these two approaches to understand this in Vedanta. First of all, of course, as we will see in the next talk, it's no longer a question, when you understand what will be talked about in the next talk, it's no longer a question of whether you should see it as God or how can you see it as God. It will be a fact that it is Brahman. Undeniable. It may be a horrible appearance of Brahman or a benign appearance of Brahman, but whatever the appearance is, you see, if you make out of gold a demon and out of gold an angel, right? It does not change the fact that it is gold. That's the level at which Vedanta operates. Evil is at the level of what we call name and form, the appearance of that reality. Now, there are two possibilities which mitigate evil in non-dualism. One is, suppose all the evil in the world is committed by me upon myself. It becomes evil when one person does it to another person. But if I go to a cop and say, I was assaulted. So, okay, tell me. He'll whip out his notebook. Who did it? Where did it happen? He said, at that place and such circumstances at that time. All right, can you describe the person? He said, I sure can. It was me. I hit myself. The cop is going to slam his book shut, and he might even book you for insulting an officer. Why? It's assault. You assaulted yourself. But why is it not a crime? Why is it not evil? Why is it not terrible? If I slap myself, why is it not terrible? Because you are the person who is committing the assault, and you are doing it upon yourself. It's not the same as one person doing it to another. Now, if there is one reality behind the entire universe, then everything is done by that reality, in that reality, to itself. Vivekananda says, praiser praised, blamer blamed are but one. Whom to praise, whom to blame? When they are but one. If I hit somebody, that person can complain legitimately. If I hit one hand with another hand, who's to complain to whom? So if there is a unity, that's one answer. The other answer is, this all become relevant in the next talk. If it is not real, if there is something, a greater reality. You see, what's the only time when we enjoy evil? When even a good person enjoys evil, the only time. In a movie, in Hollywood. The worst of things happening on screen, and you react with, you say, you clap and say, wonderful, give the guy an Oscar. When you are doing that, so if you're firmly set in a dualistic way of thinking, you will say, no, this doesn't work, this is terrible, you're trying to deny suffering. But here we must be philosophical. Let's take that one step further, then look back. Practically it does not make so much of a difference. Practically, you still have to deal with the individual, Brahman in its individual appearance, the one who is suffering and the one who is inflicting the suffering. So inflicting the suffering, depending upon the enlightenment of the society and the period, you might seek to punish or to reform. And the person who is suffering, you will try to soothe and make up. You see, if that's happening in you as an enlightened person, you'll have to live in the light of your enlightenment. How do you deal with the victim? How do you deal with the perpetrator of the crime? Right? Using your enlightenment. I'll leave it at that. We'll see. All right. Thank you.
So thank you very much. We're going to have a break now. So I would like everybody, we have 3 bathrooms. One for the men upstairs and 2 bathrooms downstairs for the women. So you can please use those. Otherwise, we have refreshments, snacks, water, coffee, tea in the back. And please go through this door and go out to the back door if you can. If you need to use bathrooms, then just go behind you. Right? We'll begin in a half an hour. There'll be a bell in about 10 minutes before the half an hour. Please come back and see me promptly. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Facebook, is this still going on?
I think so.
So Facebook, we'll continue back at 11:50. Thank you.